Tonight on Playback TV, Sixers, Memphis Grizzlies. Playback.tv/runitbackphilly. Join us over there. We got 600 members. You should be the next one. Playback.tv/runitbackphilly. We're watching the Memphis Grizzlies versus the Philadelphia 76ers. Right here in the Run It Back Philly Watch Along studio. I'll see you there.
Run it back, Philly. No frauds, no fanboys, no intros.
Did you see what Daryl Morey said on the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast? Kind of about Doc Rivers. For anyone that hasn't seen it, I'll just put it on the screen here, and we'll just play it real quick. It's on RB's Twitter page. Here's what Daryl Morey. Let me see. I hope we don't have an echo here. We might have an echo on my vocals while I'm playing this, but here's what Daryl Morey said, and you just give us all your thoughts in the comments if you haven't seen this.
I've mentioned this before. I did underestimate the time it was going to take for Joel and James to develop a chemistry. I think.
Oh, come on, Twitter. Elon, what are you doing?
I think it's me. My internet is just jacked up right now.
And again, this is another place I'd like to see that consistency, because when we have it humming, it's really humming. And I think you guys who watch every minute like I do have seen it. And then there'll be times you're just like, wait, why aren't we doing the thing that's working really well?
That's something you want to hear about your favorite team.
What's happening? And then there'll be times you're just like, wait, why aren't we doing the thing that's working really well? Like what's happening? And
bro, that is insane. Like, that's actually insane that he just said that, because Daryl Morey knows. What do you think about that first? Tell me what you think about what he just said on there.
I mean, I think you got to blame Doc. I think you got to blame Joel and James Harden. I think Joel and Doc are just so in love with playing the 4-out-1-in offense, and Harden's kind of just, accepted his role. So and the 4-out-1-in offense is great, but at times it's not great, especially when Embiid's not playmaking like he can, making slow decisions and stuff like that. So I think the blame should probably go on the coach a lot, but also the 2-star players, they got to focus up more.
Yeah, but Daryl Morey saying that just out loud, it kind of reminds me of when Doc Rivers says things like, well, in the third quarter, we just, we didn't execute, or we didn't run the game plan, or there wasn't a lot of action going on, or whatever. He says things as if he doesn't realize that he's in charge of the players that are on the floor. You know what I mean? Like he says it like he's a fan in the stands just analyzing the game. Daryl Morey just said that like he doesn't know that there's a coach that's in charge of what's happening. So he just said, why aren't we doing what works? What is happening? To me, that's him literally sitting there questioning his own coach.
Yeah. It's kind of throwing Doc under the bus, which is pretty interesting. But that brings me to the pick and roll with Joel Embiid and James Harden, which is pretty much our bread and butter and pretty much like our identity in terms of what is going to work in the playoffs. And the thing about it is you can shut it down by just switching everything. And the Sixers seem to not have a plan. Well, their plan is to attack the mismatch, give it to Joel, and have him work at the perimeter. And we all see how that works in the postseason. So, that's another reason why I really don't believe in this team, because the Celtics, they can switch everything. The Heat can switch everything and stuff like that. Like, you can take that pick and roll play away from James Harden and Joel Embiid if you get physical with them, if you play up on them, and if you have the right players to switch.
Yeah, and teams that switch to a zone for like the 97th year in a row, the Sixers, at times look like they have no idea what to do when a team goes zone. They also, and this all does have to do with the coach. It has to do with practice. It has to do with repetition. It has to do with coaching. They'll run a pick and roll again in certain times against certain teams and just spam it, and they can't stop it, and they just dominate. The Denver Nuggets in the fourth quarter, they just spammed it. They couldn't stop Joel Embiid. He just kept getting an ISO one-on-one against Jokic, who we all know cannot guard Joel Embiid at all. and they just spammed it, and the other team couldn't stop it. I say all the time, spam it until they stop it. It's like 2K. You're just hitting the L1 button, doing a pick and roll, and the other player can't stop Joel Embiid on 2K like they can't stop him in real life. You just spam it until they try to adjust and do something else. Then they have other games where it's working in the first half, and this is what Daryl's saying, and then all of a sudden in the third or the fourth, they're not running it at all. It's just Joel out there getting the ball on the perimeter, trying to create like he's Kevin Durant, and everybody's standing around watching him. And that's where the coaching does come in, because there's no adjustment from the guy on the sideline. He's watching it happen, and he just kind of lets them do it for a whole third quarter until they blow a 28-point lead in 7 minutes. And it's wild that I feel like Daryl Morey just reiterated my frustrations with Doc Rivers. So the GM of the damn team doesn't understand why we go away from what works in crunch time. The same thing I've been saying for almost 3 years now with Doc. So, it's wild that Daryl said that. Like, why do you think they do go away from it in those situations? Is it like, I don't think Doc's telling him what to do during a game. I think there's a game plan, and he just sits there and watches. And then he goes to I'm serious, because then he goes to a press conference and he just comments on the game as if he was just sitting there watching it. So is it James Harden and Joel Embiid not realizing that, like, we can dominate this team by just pick and rolling all night?
I think it's like a combination of a few things. I think when they get a lead, like the Cavs game, they kind of just, are like, okay, we're just going to go ISO mode because we're feeling ourselves. I think Doc, his teams, he tends to give the players a lot of freedom, which could be a great thing and also be a bad thing. But the thing I'm looking for is, what is the counter to this switching defense? Like, how are they going to overcome this? And number one, you got to get stops. You got to get stops, and you got to get up in transition, because in transition, the defense isn't set. So it's easier to just get right into the pick and roll, and they can't switch, or they can switch, but it's easier to beat people like in that situation. So you got to get stops, and you got to push the pace, and Harden and Embiid got to be, locked into each other and things like that. Also, Harden's got to beat mismatches. You keep switching, take the big guy off the dribble, or take the bigger forward off the dribble. But last year he couldn't do that. Against the Cavs, he was doing that in the first half, but then all of a sudden he was like, I don't want to shoot the ball. And that's another problem with my Joel Embiid and James Harden pick and roll. If 95% of the time Harden's just looking to pass in the pick and roll, in the playoffs, it's not going to be as successful, because coaches know Harden just wants to pass. And in the Cavs game, you saw in the first half, he was getting wherever he wanted. He was attacking switches in transition and things like that. But there's too many times where Harden just, turns into pass. And I've gotten on him in the past, like over dribbling, but I also get on him now for like just looking to pass too much. I'm like, just shoot. Shoot the ball. You're efficient from three. Take more step backs and things like that. Just playoff instincts don't revert to, oh, I'm the pass guy now. Oh, I'm the scorer guy. Like, it seems like he struggles with that a bit.
Yeah, I think in the Cavs game, he had 8 points and 6 assists in the first 7 minutes of the game. And he finished the game with like 19 and 12, which 19 and 12, that's a Halliburton stat line. That's not a James Harden stat line for me. I need more than 19. When you're up 28 in the first half and the game comes down to the wire, it just feels like I didn't notice that he disappeared, but I guess because I was focusing on other things. But then by the end of the game, I'm like, wait a minute, I actually didn't really see James Harden doing anything in the second half. So he needs to be consistently find a balance. And I think it's still a learning curve for him after playing 10 years in Houston, where he's just bang, 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 aggressive. Everything's about him. He's trying to play number two to a guy, and I don't think he's done that before, really. He tried in Brooklyn. He was going to try to do it, but they got 7 games, with Durant and Kyrie. So, yeah, I think it's really still a learning curve for him to try to play second fiddle to Joel and know when to attack and when to be aggressive and when to be the facilitator. But I have faith in him in the playoffs. I think He might be low managing too, man. I really think that too with Joel, when you see him taking first halves off where he's just watching guys do layups, and we're like, yo, I'm over here roasting, George Niang and Montrezl Harrell, and now you're out here. Now you're out here just standing by letting people do layups. So what's really going on here? And then he'll turn it on in the fourth quarter and start blocking shots and start being aggressive. So I think at the end of the day, man, all of the issues that we see is just a lack of effort mostly. And I really think by the time when the playoffs start, you're going to get that 110% from everybody. And it's going to be a different game. Like the beginning of the season, I was saying, like, I'll take 45 games from Embiid if I get 100% and healthy in the playoffs. So I really think that's what's going on. You know what I mean? Like I think, and that's why they play up when they're on national TV against the Bucks or the Nuggets. They play up because they're like, all right, this is a playoff atmosphere. This one matters. And then they get the Orlando Magic on a Monday, and they're like, we're gonna jog around a little bit, and then by the fourth quarter, they're like, oh shit, they have 7, 6'11" athletes that are out rebounding us by 40, and now we're down in the fourth, and we got to try to claw back in, but. Yeah, I think they've competed against the best teams pretty well, except for the Boston Celtics.
Run it back, Philly. No frauds, no fanboys, no intros.